Good afternoon, everyone.
Is it working?
Buenas tardes, buen après-midi. It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to begin by warmly thanking our partners from Regions with Nature and our Regions for members and the many subnational governments whose experience shaped today's session. Your leadership is what drives progress on the ground. In over a year, as you know, COP17 in Yerevan will host the first ever global review of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. This will be the moment where the world takes stock of whether we are truly on track to meet the framework's targets. By February 2026, countries must submit their 7th national reports using new templates linked directly to the biodiversity framework's indicators. These reports will form the backbone of the global review. Subnational governments are not on the sidelines of this process. They are at the heart of implementation, restoring ecosystems, expanding protected areas, mobilizing communities, and turning commitments into action. But too often, subnational contributions remain underreported and under-recognized. The good news is that the door is open. At COP16, parties will formally invited subnational and other actors to share their own reports and contributions. Platforms like Regions with Nature and the Regions for Biodiversity Learning platform provide exactly the mechanisms we need to align regional data with global indicators, to document achievements, and to bring subnational leadership into the global conversation. So today's session will focus on how subnational governments can strengthen their monitoring and reporting, not only to demonstrate progress, but to make sure their voices and results count in the 2026 global review. So I really hope that the discussion today helps us move from framework to action, from local results to global impact. So thank you so much for being here, and I really look forward to learning from your insights and leadership. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we are very grateful to Natalia for providing us with those warm welcoming remarks to start our session today. And now moving along, in order to frame today's discussion, I'm going to turn the floor over to Ingrid Kotzi, Director of Nature, Biodiversity and Health at ICLEI City's Biodiversity Center. Ingrid is going to help to highlight the strategic role of subnational governments in the CBD global review process and share also some critical insights into what's ahead between now and COP17. So over to you, Ingrid. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jordan. And Natalia's welcome words were really a very good segue for what I have to say. I think we all know that across the world, biodiversity is under unprecedented pressure. And the decisions that we take now and in the coming years will determine whether we can truly halt and reverse biodiversity loss and reach our goal of living in harmony with nature. As we look ahead to COP17, the CBD's global review process is gaining momentum as we speak. This is the moment when the world will take stock of progress, we will identify gaps, and shape the path forward for biodiversity. But this progress cannot be complete without the voices and experiences of subnational governments. The moment is not only about global targets, but very much also about the realities unfolding in the subnational areas and communities everywhere. Those ecosystems that sustain livelihoods, provide resilience against climate change, and uphold cultural identities are managed and protected not only by national governments, but very specifically and significantly by the subnational governments working closest to the ground. Their knowledge, experience, and action is indispensable to painting an accurate picture of our collective progress, and as Natalia said, to be counted. To help bring these perspectives into focus, we have tools such as the Regions with Nature Action Platform, where both ICLEI and Regions 4 are partners. And the important thing about this platform is it is recognized in CBD Decision 1512 as the commitment and reporting platform for subnational governments' contributions to the Global Biodiversity Framework and NBSAPs. Natalia has also referred to the Regions 4 case study database. And both these initiatives and platforms are vital challenges for capturing, showcasing, and aligning the regional efforts with global biodiversity goals. These platforms ensure that the lessons, innovations, and achievements of subnational governments are visible and accessible, but also strengthen the connection between local realities and national and international decision-making and goals. These tools are going to be discussed in our session today. Importantly, the CBD now recognizes the role of subnational governments along with other non-state actors in Decision 1632 and its Annex 2. This decision sets out the reporting mechanisms to capture the contributions of subnational governments within the global review process. It marks a significant shift because for the first time, regional action or at the subnational level can be documented, reported, and integrated directly into the global biodiversity framework to ensure that the work that is done at the subnational level carries real weight in shaping collective outcomes. The lead up to COP17 next year in Yerevan will be decisive. It will determine how our regional voices are heard, how local and subnational achievements are recognized, and how the global community integrates these perspectives into decisions that will affect all of us. This is the space where subnational action connects with international accountability, and where the choices that we make together will resonate far beyond COP17 as the clock's ticking towards the deadline of 2030. Thank you very much, and back to you, Jordan.
Thank you, Ingrid, for that wonderful overview of the relevance of these platforms, and in particular the urgency, right, and the role that they have in our very short window that we have to 2030, which is really just around the corner. And with that, we're going to move into a much more practical session on how subnational governments can engage with the Regions with Nature Action platform. And to do this, I'd like to welcome Jade Sullivan. Jade is Professional Officer at ICLEI CBC. Jade is going to guide us through how to use this platform, how you can report your biodiversity commitments, input data, and in this way amplify your region's contributions globally, in particular in the run-up to the global review process. So Jade, I'll hand it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jordan. So I have a brief set of slides just to give some background information. I'm not going to go into it much. Next slide, please. So yes, to start off, just for some background context, as I mentioned, Regions with Nature is a partnership initiative that we started in collaboration with Regions 4 and the IUCN. It is there to support regional and subnational government officials and other stakeholders to enhance ecosystem restoration, biodiversity conservation, and nature-based solutions in their regions. The platform is currently free to join and is set up to provide regional governments with a space to connect with one another, share their experiences, and access tools and resources. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, I've mentioned this. Yes. So some of our founding regions include Yucatan, Campeche, Sao Paulo, Pernambuco, Goa, Catalonia, the Scottish government, the Western Cape, and Quebec, and some of which you will hear from here today. Can we go to the next slide? So yeah, so as Ingrid mentioned, the platform has been officially recognized in Decision 1512 as the space where regional government should go to report their progress against implementing the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. With the last COP, which was COP16, we received some funding from the government of Quebec. And with this, we've actively enhanced the platform to align with regional priorities, improve user friendliness, and work hand in hand with the CBD platform, which is the open house platform, to integrate the data. So whatever regions report on the platform will feed into the CBD's platform. I'll now head over to just do a short demonstration. I'm not going to go into much detail, but just want to show you what this looks like in practice. So I'll share the screen from my side.
Thank you, Jid. You should have access now to sharing your screen. Yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
Can everyone see my screen?
We can.
Okay, perfect. So firstly, just do some basics. Once you go to www.regionswithnature.org, you'll see that on your top right, you'll be able to log in. Generally, when your region signs up, you'll get a username and a password, and you'll use that to log in. The platform allows you to sort of build a profile. You can share images, quotes from your head of government, and also like your social media, your regional government's website, YouTube, all of that nice things. And you can also share with us features from your region that your region is quite proud of to share. So for today, I'm not, as I mentioned, I'm going to keep it brief. So we also have a tools and resources section. And then we also have a what our regions are doing, which is basically, if I can just give you a quick snippet. It's like a Facebook page. We've basically set it up so that when a region updates on the platform, it automatically populates and it shows you which region is active on the platform. But most importantly, what we are here for today, the action platform. So the action platform has been built to align with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And you'll see it's divided into 3 sections, which is similar to that of the GBF. And what we've sort of done is we have gone through a process where we created this framework. So we took the GBF and we tried to scale it to a regional level. And we've gone through 2 piloting processes where we've consulted the regions, checked that it aligned, adapted it accordingly. So once you get to this part of the platform, you'll go to view my commitments. And over here, you'll see it's divided into commitments and action areas underneath. You'll see in the commitments that it aligns with specific sustainable development goals, but also specific global biodiversity framework goals. So once your region clicks make a commitment, it will light up and allow the region to make certain actions. These are open-ended, and we've left it open-ended because we know that the actions differ from region to region. So how your region is decreasing the conversion of natural areas is not the same in another part of the world. And then you are also able to set baselines and smart targets. So the baselines and the smart targets have been updated to align with the set of indicators released for the GBF. And what we've done is we've made the platform quite voluntary, and like you can go as much as you want or as little as you want. So able to make the commitment or fill in the baselines or the smart targets or just fill in a description. So yeah, that's that. And what we've also done is we've created a little leaderboard where you can sort of see which governments are doing what, how many commitments have been made. And just to give you a brief idea of what this looks like in practice, you'll see that the government of Quebec has filled in their profile. And this is public, so anyone can access this, see what the government is doing, what they have uploaded, and also the actions and the commitments that they have taken. We also have a link to the case study database, which Gabby will get into after this. But yeah, we use a lot of the case studies from here on our platform. And yeah, so from my side, that is Regions with Nature. Thank you very much. I'll hand back over to Jordan.
Thank you, Jade, for that very succinct but effective tutorial. And we definitely encourage all of you to connect to the platform, to learn more about it. And if you do have any questions, you can always contact ICLEI and Regions 4, and we'd be happy to help and assist you as well in using it to make sure that your commitments are reflected. We're going to move over now to our very own Gabriela Carrera. Gabi is a Biodiversity Program Officer here at Regions 4. She's going to be sharing how you can contribute your success stories through the case study database tool that Jade referred to just recently. This is a really vital tool that's turning regional action into globally relevant impact stories and can potentially feed into the global review process. Gabi will tell us a little bit more about that. So Gabi, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jordan. It's a pleasure for me to share the work that we've been advancing with our Regions with Nature partners and our members as well, who have contributed very much to make this initiative, the case study database, work. So as Jade explained and Jordan as well, the action platform is a place, not a tool for us to share commitments, but there's another tool in Regions with Nature that is for us to share our best practices from regional government, so your greatest solutions, and to showcase that you're not only committing, but that you already have some interesting, impactful stories that already have results, right? So that they are aligned with the GBF and that you're already doing so much. So this is the place where we showcase them. And this case study database was created with intent to feed these global solutions, these global agendas and conventions like the CBD and the global review process, but also with the intention of making these case studies replicable, these experiences replicable to other similar, for regions that have similar challenges as those shared. So far we have 22 already case studies published. They're available in English, French, and Spanish, and we already have some more on the pipeline to be published before COP30. I've checked, and we have more than 15,000 downloads in total for the case study. So it's incredible the reach and engagement that it has, and we see that it's getting to people, to different actors. But in order to make sure that these solutions and the efforts, the actions that regional governments are doing can feed into the global review process and the CBD, we have created a specific form. So the idea is that we'll use two sources of information to showcase these best practices. From one side, we'll take information from the cases that are already published, that are relevant, that align, that we already see the results from the GBF. And we will accept as well some new short submissions that have a specific format that I'll show to you very soon, that is reviewed by the CBD and that can potentially be featured in the CBD's report on the global review process by subnational governments. So the idea that there's the possibility of having some boxes with best practices showcased in this report. So we want to gather your best stories, your best experiences, to make sure that we can process that and submit them to the CBD and hopefully choose the most impactful ones. But don't worry, because all of the relevant contributions, if they're not featured in the CBD report because of space or because of other limitations, they will still be featured in our communication campaign around the global review process and on the roadmap to COP17. So take this as a really strategic opportunity for you to place, to share your stories, your strongest GBF actions in your region, to showcase that regional governments are already taking the lead. We already have results in some regions, and to have evidence that demonstrate that can go through these official processes. So we have created this form. You have here the QR code for these to access the form. The form is very simple. It's quite brief. We have around, you can see it entirely here, but it's around 15 questions, but they're very easy to answer. I'll just ask you to pay specific attention to filling out the description of the best practice, including the objective, the scope, and the actions carried out, as well as the key outcomes and results. and as well the targets addressed. This is something that the usual or regular case studies from the case study database already have this analysis on which are the key targets addressed by the GBF. But if you want to include new ones that are specifically submitted for this process, please also share them here and do this analysis, and I'm available as well. We'll have my email at the end of the presentation of the PowerPoint. If you have any questions on how to submit, if you have questions about the information that you're providing or what is the best initiative that you can submit through this form, I'll be available to answer that. And you have until the end of November, more or less, to fill out this form, so we have enough time to process and send to the CBD. So, yep, thank you very much. And I really invite you to participate and share your strongest stories and solutions in this process.
Thank you so much, Gabby. Yeah, we're very pleased with the interest that the case study database tool has generated, but we know that it has potential to do so much more because you're already doing so much more. So we really do encourage you to engage, to reach out, to let us know about your best practices and innovative success stories, and make sure, right, that we can provide visibility and connect as well with the global review process. Now we're going to have a more peer-to-peer moment, right? So this is region to region, right? Specifically from the experience of Quebec. Quebec, of course, is one of the leading regions in biodiversity reporting, a founding member of the Regions with Nature platform, and historically very strong in support in biodiversity leadership, both locally in Quebec as well as internationally. And to share with us the experience of Quebec, we have with us today Caroline Daguet, Biodiversity Projects Coordinator from Quebec's Ministry of Environment, the fight against climate change, wildlife, and parks. And Caroline is going to walk us through their journey, talking about what worked, what has been challenging, and in particular what others might be able to learn from the particular experience in Quebec. So I'll hand the floor over to you now, Caroline. The floor is yours. I think you need to unmute your microphone, Caroline.
Can you all see my screen now?
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Thank you. So I'll dive right in. With a reminder that at COP15 in Montreal in December 2022, our Prime Minister François Legault indicated that to contribute to the global biodiversity framework, Quebec would adopt a 2030 nature plan. And this was done in October of 2024, when the nature plan and its associated 2024-2028 action plan were released. A quick overview, I won't go into the details, just to highlight that Quebec's nature plan is organized in a similar way to the global biodiversity framework in 3 different areas. We have 3 goals. And the 14 targets of Quebec's nature plan reflect the vast majority of the global targets. So on the reporting side now, how are we going to monitor progress, and how we're going to show whether or not we're reaching those targets? For some targets, it could seem relatively straightforward. For example, target 3 with the percentage of protected and conserved areas. However, there are other aspects of the target that need to be reflected. This is true of target 3 with representativeness, effective management, ecological connectivity, but also for our target 1, which is more a combination of several of the global targets, and land use change is one aspect that we can use for an indicator, but we have also the aspects of combating climate change that we would need to look into, improving access to nature. So there's quite a bit of work to do to have indicators that truly reflect all aspects of each of our targets. So the criteria we've used in Quebec to tackle that is really, we want to make sure that we are coherent with indicators set in the Global Biodiversity Framework's monitoring framework. And We want to prioritize existing data and analysis with robust methodology for efficiency, really, and to get something out soon rather than spend years developing new indicators. So we want to also, in this sense, reuse existing indicators when they're relevant from other Quebec strategies and action plans, such as the government strategy on sustainable development, the 2030 Sustainable Agriculture Plan, the 2030 Green Economy Plan. So we've got several other tools to get inspiration from and to reuse indicators from. Also, in the criteria, we want to generate trends in the decade. So we need ideally two, well, at least two, ideally three data points throughout the decade to show how we're progressing towards reaching those targets. The approach we've chosen is to go through a consultation, quite a vast consultation. And last year and early into 25, we consulted our experts within the government, as well as researchers and people from academia. And I will share on the chat with you a recent article that has come out to describe that approach. So if you want to find out a little bit more, you can dive into this. It's just come out last week. Then in the spring and summer of this year, we've consulted with Indigenous nations and organizations in Quebec. We wanted to make sure we had their views and understood properly how we could adapt perhaps or add some indicators to really reflect their realities and their leadership. And what's going on at the moment, we're going through the final rounds with Quebec ministries to try and polish things off, really decide on how the set of indicators is going to look. We're really aiming for a maximum of 3 indicators per target. With 14 targets, that's already well above 40 indicators, which is quite a bit. It's not always possible to restrict to 3, but we're aiming to restrict as much as we can to make it really feasible to follow all these indicators. And we remain open to adjustments as needed. We know that some analyses, some more data is going to become available in the future, and we can change, adapt a little bit some of the indicators chosen, or perhaps add to them. And while doing that work for Quebec, we've also worked in tandem with Regions with Nature, Regions for ICLEI, to identify indicators and baselines that could apply more widely to all subnational governments. So our involvement with the Regions with Nature platform, as mentioned before, we're one of the founding partners of Regions with Nature, and we've provided funding for the initial action platform development. And Jane mentioned that there's been some testing, and we've been part of that to test the platform, recommend adjustments. So it's been interesting to go through that process. And we've already shared our commitments on the action platform, so our targets and objectives from the Quebec 2030 Nature Plan and from its associated action plan are already there on the platform, and we will continue to update our actions also in the coming weeks and months. And just to insist a little bit more on what was mentioned before, but it's really, this tool is really a way to strengthen the role of regional governments, highlight their leadership, and also their commitments towards biodiversity. Even though there can be fluctuations in national commitments, subnational governments can really show how they hold strong and commit to acting towards nature conservation, biodiversity. We need to consider some further development for the reporting side of the platform. Currently, there are limited options to report on indicators, but for commitments, it's all ready to go. So we would really urge you to join the movement, join Regions with Nature, and share your 2030 biodiversity commitments and your baselines, your targets, and yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for that inspiring example. We were just discussing the other day with Ingrid and Jade and Gabby this challenge, right? Because indicators do have to be respond to local realities, to local needs, and it's not always easy to bridge that gap, right, to make them also relevant for these international platforms and the context of the GBF. So I think Quebec has done that in quite an elegant way, as well, bringing Indigenous peoples into the dialogue, which of course is extremely important and valuable. So we really do appreciate you sharing that experience, and of course your support in making sure that the platform is now up and running. And we really do think that this is going to be a very significant tool moving forward. So thank you very much for that. We're now going to transition into our roundtable discussion. Regional realities, a conversation on measuring progress on biodiversity action. For this, I'm going to hand the floor back over to Ingrid Kotzi from ICLEI. This session is going to feature 4 leading Regions with Nature members: Rio de Janeiro, California, Western Cape, and Scotland, who are going to reflect on their own experiences in implementing the GBF, their own plans to report progress against their commitments. So we really are looking forward to a dynamic discussion about the challenges, the breakthroughs, what regional biodiversity action really looks like in practice. So to guide this discussion, it's a pleasure to hand the floor back over to Ingrid to lead the discussion. Ingrid, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jordan. And I think it's really fitting that this follows that presentation by Caroline. And just on behalf of Regions with Nature, but also my own organization, ICLEI, I want to thank the government of Quebec for the funding to make this possible, so that we can really have a platform where subnational governments can report. And also for putting them leading in terms of actually starting to engage on the platform and showing us. It's really very exciting to see this. Now, I want to introduce the panelists, but I do think that we might be missing one of our panelists. But I know that we have the Marie Ikemoto. She is the Subsecretary for Climate and Biodiversity from the state of Rio de Janeiro with us today. We also have Madeline Drake, who's the Assistant Secretary for Biodiversity and Habitat from California Natural Resources Agency. And I know that Marlene Laras, the Director of Biodiversity and Coastal Management from the Western Cape Provincial Government, is with us. I'm not sure if Diarmuid O'Neill, who's the Director of Environment and Forestry from the Scottish Government, has been able to join us. As we indicated earlier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the same question.
Sorry, I just have some news from the chat. I see that we do have Diarmuid. He's in another account, so we'll just move him just in a second while you introduce the question to speaker, and yeah, it should be all right.
So he'll join us. Fantastic. So we have a full house. Okay. So to really give everybody a fair speaking chance, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the same question to all the panelists, and they will respond in the order that I introduced them. So we'll have first Marie, then Madeline, Marlene, and Diarmuid, and we're going to try and do this seamlessly. I'm going to have to time keep, unfortunately. I hate doing this, and if you do go over, please forgive me, but I'm going to just gently stop you so that our next panelist can have a fair opportunity to respond as well. The question number 1 to all the panelists is: the CBD decision 1632, as we said, provides a framework for local and subnational governments to report on their voluntary contributions to the GBF targets, as well as NBSAPs. How is your subnational government positioning itself to contribute meaningfully to the global biodiversity review that's leading up to COP17? Can we start, please, with Marie for your intervention? Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid, and greetings to all colleagues. As we move towards COP17, Rio de Janeiro's work is guided by 3 main pillars: multi-level governance, synergies among the 3 Rio conventions, and financing and implementation. First, about multi-level governance. Since 2023, Rio has been engaged in Brazil's national biodiversity discussions through ABEMA, aligning our state strategy with the national biodiversity strategy and the global biodiversity framework. At COP16, we launched our state biodiversity strategy and action plan, the first at state level in Brazil, and developed it with the partnership with the Nature Conservancy. We are also supporting municipality. São João da Barra finalized the first city-level biodiversity strategy in Brazil, and 50 municipalities already have Atlantic rainforest plans. And we are working together with these municipalities to update this plan, to incorporate the local biodiversity action plans. And well, the synergies about the Rios Convention. Actually, we are developing our state climate change plan, and that is fully integrated with the biodiversity strategy. At the local level, we are coordinating 56 municipal climate action plans in partnership with the UN Habitat and the federal government, covering around 60 of state municipalities. And these plans are centered on ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solution, and aligned with the local biodiversity action plans. And final third, financing and implementation. Beyond planning, Rio is delivering results. We expanded protected areas to over 30% of the territory, and we maintained near zero deforestation for more than a decade, with a net gain of 2% of forest cover in the last 4 decades. And this year, we will also launch the work with UNDP to elaborate our biodiversity finance plan to secure long-term funding. And with funds such as the Atlantic Rainforest Fund and the Environment State Fund, and with mechanisms like match funding, we are channeling resources into conservation units, restoration projects, and community initiatives. In short, Rio de Janeiro is advancing an integrated, well-financed and multi-level governance approach to ensure that our local actions are aligned with national and global biodiversity goals as we approach to COP17.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you so much. Can we have Madeleine, please?
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. Lots of good conversation so far, and California is thrilled to be a part of this conversation. So reporting for us is a really high priority in California. We really want to maintain public trust. We want to showcase the project that we're making and how it benefits all of Californians. And we really want to inspire new partnerships and creativity and innovation so that we can move further and faster to achieve these really ambitious goals. So just as important as coming out with that strategy is making sure that we are tracking that progress. So for us in California, a lot of the different targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework, we put under the banner of 30 by 30. So if you hear us talk a lot about 30 by 30, there's a lot of the different 23 targets underneath that banner. And through 30 by 30, we're actually required by our legislature to release an annual progress report of how we're doing. And so in that annual progress report, we're reporting on things like how many acres we conserved, what is our coordination between partners, and then how are we funding, at least through state funding, different conservation of lands, stewardship, restoration projects, monitoring, and research that's really informing our biodiversity conservation. And I love how Jade sort of equated the online platform to Facebook. We really like to equate ours to a scrapbook where, yes, it does have those high level stats, but we also like to have pictures and really show real world actions of how that's being implemented so people can really understand what these numbers actually mean on the ground. So our hope for COP17 is that we can easily translate what we're already tracking to inform sort of what's happening and how that translates to the global biodiversity framework. We really want people to understand the progress we're making, but we also want to learn from others where we're falling short in our progress. So it's really important that we're not only reporting, but we're also looking and reading others' information as well. So we have a lot to showcase, but we have a lot to learn. And we're really, really grateful for this decision to allow for subnational governments to report sort of independently because federal political systems shift. And so it can be very difficult to sort of have to go through that framework. But we're a very large state in California, and we have a lot to showcase and many partners throughout the state. So looking forward to being able to share our progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeleine. Can we have Marlene, please?
Good afternoon, colleagues. And yes, a lovely session so far. See, my camera is trying to switch on. There we go, just to greet you. So the Western Cape government was an early adopter in terms of trying to align with the CBD. We had 2015 to 2025 Provincial Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. And that was renewed and slightly delayed due to the delay in the GBF process due to COVID. But what we've just completed is our revised Provincial Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, and that is actually en route for approval and signature as I speak. I think the critical thing for us in terms of regional governments' contributions is how aggregation happens. And I think that's a really critical challenge. The Western Cape is participating very directly in and aligning to the development of a new NBSAP for South Africa, which is in progress currently, and obviously South Africa preparing also for the reporting this year. Our commitment as a province comes from quite a long time ago, but also we are also signatories to the Edinburgh Declaration. And within that, our contribution is hardwired into also a political commitment. But we feel that with the global responsibility that we hold in the Cape Floristic region, ultimately, together with other similarly challenged Mediterranean climate regions, we have a huge responsibility to really show globally how we are progressing towards this. So we are committed to reporting. Our entity, Cape Nature, the public entity that provides with a lot of the services on the ground, produces an annual state of conservation report. And we'll be basing that, using that specifically to draw up into the indicators that we have in the PBSAP, which are aligned to the GBF. Thanks, Ingrid.
Thanks, Marlene. And we now have Druid, if you can come in from Scotland. I'm glad we have you here. If you can just respond to this question, please. Thank you. Probably need to unmute yourself because I believe you're not as part of the panelists. Maybe if the tech team can just help you.
Hi, Ingrid. Colleagues, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties on our side. So thank you for the invitation to join today. Interesting conversation and discussion. One of the things that I will take away is that we haven't updated Scotland on the platform, so we will definitely take that away and do that. In terms of the question to address, so Scotland's strategic framework for biodiversity sets out accountability as a key condition for success that needs to be in place if we are to achieve our goals for nature recovery. And therefore, we are creating statutory targets for nature restoration in Scotland alongside a new framework for monitoring and evaluation of our progress. A couple of things just to note on that is that we have two chief scientific advisors who are also leading academics within Scotland looking after the marine environment and the environment and forestry area. And on the back of that, we have centres of expertise relating to particular areas of concern or interest or specialism, such as the water environment. And it's worth briefly reflecting on the constitutional position in Scotland. So some colleagues may be aware of this, but Scotland is one of 4 nations which make up the UK. And the UK is itself the state party to the UN and its conventions. And therefore environmental matters, but actually alongside that, environmental matters are devolved to each of the nations, the 4 nations in the UK. So for us, our reporting is quite complex. There's no single methodology for the UK as a whole, although Scotland have published our own National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan earlier this year. And a key delivery mechanism of that will, as I've said already, be statutory nature restoration targets that are currently in preparation. And some of those include, similar to other colleagues, halting biodiversity decline by 2030 and restoring regenerative biodiversity by 2045. And some of our funding to help with that is 185 million funding into peatland restoration and woodland creation, as well as 200 million to work on the impacts of biodiversity loss and climate change more broadly. And then finally, the CPD's reporting format gives us a scope to highlight aspects of biodiversity and processes that are particularly relevant to Scotland, and it allows us to showcase successful projects. Perhaps most importantly, it gives us a chance to learn from other nations that are involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to rush you guys. You're giving us such amazing information here. But let's go to our second question. What are the main challenges that your region faces in aligning biodiversity reporting at the subnational level with the GBF indicators, and how could you resolve some of these challenges? I'm going to start again with, I think our first one was Marie from Rio, please. So if you can start, the clock is ticking. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So one of the main challenges we face is aligning state-level data and national monitoring systems with the coming Montreal indicators. The new Brazil biodiversity strategy establishes that monitoring will be carried out by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change in partnership with another 2 federal institutions, IBGE and IPEA. And while this work is underway, the national indicators have not been fully defined. We consider this work requires consistent methodologies, interoperability between local, state, and national databases, and capacity building to ensure that municipalities and the states in Brazil contributions can feed into Brazil's national reporting. And in Rio de Janeiro, we have the partnership with UNDP, and UNDP is helping us to address this issue through the Biodiversity Finance Plan, because we are not only structuring innovative finance mechanisms, but also establishing a monitoring framework for our state biodiversity strategy. This includes the development of indicators, tools, and regular progress to track the implementation and on the strategy to make results transparent and accountable, of course, considering the federal work that is underway. And so combining finance, implementation, and monitoring, we expect to ensure that our state strategy moves beyond planning into effective delivery. Thanks.
Thank you. Can we have Madeleine, please?
Yes, so determining common metrics across so many entities is really, really difficult, but so important if we want to report out. So data accuracy, even at the subnational level in California, that's been a challenge for us and something that we are always striving to improve. How do we get people to report the data? And then, to bring that to even higher level, that's a really hard task, especially because there's so much nuance to every individual project. And how do you really capture that when you're having to translate the data to higher and higher levels. So we want to hold ourselves to a high standard and a high merit of data, and we try our best there, but we also don't want to let perfection get in the way of progress. So making sure that we are sort of continuing to report out the best we possibly can. And the scientist in me is like, and report out all the assumptions there too, right? But really making sure that we're continuing to move forward. And then, in California, we're doing varying on the 23 different targets, right? Some of them we're doing really well. Some of them we could use a little bit more work. So how do we tell that balanced story, and why we're prioritizing some over others is going to be important to us, as I'm sure many as well. So I appreciate that the structure that we're building is something that's kind of rigid and has those common metrics, but then also allows for that flexibility so that you can highlight case studies, so that you can, talk about some of those nuances that I think that everybody can still learn from along the way. So it's a very difficult issue, but one that, we can all tackle and that we can all still learn from each other. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Madeleine. And Marlene, over to you.
Thank you, Ingrid. I think that the issue of aligning metrics and indicators goes just beyond, far beyond the global biodiversity framework, and really applies to all the multilateral environmental agreements. That those indicators really need to be specifically aligned. Often we're measuring the same thing, or we're expecting the same outcomes, especially in the adaptation land space. We also are in a very similar situation, I think, to Rio de Janeiro. We're a little bit ahead of the game. We're waiting for the national indicators to settle, also in terms of alignment. And I think one of the challenges here is in the aggregation, because if we aren't using the same metrics, then aggregation is just a theory, ultimately to see the full picture. And we need to see the full picture more than just what we plan to do, but actually in the outcomes that resulted. So the impact level indicators ultimately more focus on that and more capability to achieve that. So resourcing is always an issue, but we do have an incredibly strong science leader in our South African National Biodiversity Institute that is responsible for biodiversity data, and then also within our Cape Nature scientific authority as well. I think some of the challenges are also relating to mandates in different ecosystem types. The issue of who, for example, is responsible for water resources and marine resources versus protected areas expansion, for example, at different spheres. And then, of course, critical is how you pull from the local level, specifically the local authority level, where it's incredibly difficult, more difficult for them to relate to the GBF. So ultimately, the regions play a critical fulcrum for that interchange, and hence probably we sit with the challenges most of all.
Thank you so much, Marlene. And our last one, Dermot, from Scotland's perspective, please.
Thanks. We're in a similar position, I guess, to colleagues in California, South Africa, and Brazil on some aspects of this. So the most significant challenge that we're facing is just the sheer size and complexity of the report, and how we kind of navigate our way through that, particularly around several novel reporting mechanisms, just because the guidance doesn't exist. So, for example, target 18, 20 and 23, and 18 is around making sure that incentives aren't harmful to biodiversity, etc. So not having the guidance around that makes it a challenge for us, really. On the more positive side of it, I guess, as part of the global review, Scottish Government's Nature Agency, which is known as Nature Scot, led on producing the whole of the UK's first red list of ecosystems, which will be reported as a UK biodiversity indicator this November. And we see that as a great opportunity to assess the status of our ecosystems across Scotland, and some of those have global importance, such as cool temperate heathland and our coasts and seas. It'll also help us focus our efforts in terms of where we need to make the greatest difference at the greatest speed. And then in terms of genetic diversity, given that that's one of the three components of biodiversity as defined by CBD itself. Scotland was one of the first regions in the world to produce a genetic diversity assessment for wild species in 2020, and we're working alongside partners in Europe as part of the Genoa Action, as well as with the Joint Nature Committee to report at a UK level. And that means that we're being able to collaborate with researchers in Libya, Mexico, and Australia, where we're also developing a site-based genetic assessment tool that can be used anywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, this has been quite a race, but very rich. And with that, I'm going to hand back to our main moderator, Jordan. Thank you, folks.
Oh yeah, thank you, Ingrid, for moderating that that lightning round, but with very interesting and intriguing interventions. So I really do want to thank all of our roundtable speakers for such an insightful exchange. And now we're at the open floor segment. So we'd like to open the floor to anyone who has a question, a comment, a reflection. So this is, an opportunity to engage directly with any or all of our presenters today. If you have, whether it's a technical query about the platform, the Regions with Nature Action platform, a strategic insight that you might have to share, or a particular challenge that you are facing in your region or your organization, now would be the time to speak. So please feel free to engage either through the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat if you have questions that you would prefer to put down in written form, or you can ask for the floor directly by raising your hand. So I'm not sure if anyone willing to break the ice.
I can break the ice just by saying very, very fast that Diarmuid, the genetic assessment that you mentioned that you made in Scotland is actually published in the case study database. We have a case study about that. So if you're interested in learning more about that experience, which is very interesting, and there's so much learnings around that case. So if you're interested in that, you can find it in our case study database as well. So yeah, for all other participants that maybe were curious about a bit more from Scotland's intervention.
Thanks, Gabby. I'm not seeing any hands so far. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions or comments to make. If not, I could maybe at least we can maybe have a bit of a general question as well that any of our panelists are welcome to respond to, or really anyone who's on the call. So we've heard a lot today about the Regions with Nature Action platform. I'd like to hear maybe from the perspective of the different regions on the panel, or any regions that are here with us today, what features stood out to you, and if you see it as feasible, right, to engage with this platform, if you plan to engage with this platform, what the value that you see in engaging with this platform is. If there's any general reflections on that, that would certainly be welcome. So I'm not sure maybe if any of our panelists may have a reflection. And we know that Quebec is already engaged directly with the platform. I'm not sure if anyone else has had the opportunity to do so, or if there's anything that has particularly called your attention on the call today. Or if there are any, sorry, Marlene, did you have a?
Yeah, I just think some of our reflections would be, we've got a long way to go in navigating and trying to align with the tool, obviously on the basis of our concluded and approved provincial biodiversity strategy and action plan, which has a time frame of 25 to 2030. So we would obviously, once receiving that finality on the approval, want to navigate and test it more. But certainly we believe it'll be useful for us, but it'll also flush out, I believe, in the testing, a number of issues for us to think about and reflect on, specifically in terms of metrics. And hopefully it will also provide some feedback to Regions with Nature in terms of refinements.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marlene. Any other panelists have?
Yeah, Jordan,
go ahead.
one thing for us that there's definitely a real benefit from is just the fact that we can highlight what Scotland is doing, because sometimes in the noisy competition of four nations within the UK, work can get lost or diluted. So I think from that perspective, it really makes a difference to be able to amplify the really good work that colleagues are doing across Scotland. One of the things that I don't know whether for today or not, but one of the things that we're wrestling with a little bit internally is trying to win some of the conversation back through storytelling. We feel like in the last 12 months, 18 months, that it's harder to get airplay or radio time, if for want of a different expression, around the impact of nature and biodiversity, and trying to get that much more woven into the heart of policy. So I'd be keen if anyone on the call's got good solutions for that Scotland could adopt. But that's something that we're trying to do alongside everything else at the minute.
Thanks, Jeremy. That's a great point. Anyone have any reflections on that, or maybe facing a similar challenge of getting the word out, right, on biodiversity and making it more transversal across policy areas, or maybe some solutions? Yeah, go ahead, Marlene.
Reflection from our side is if you root it in resource resilience, it really breathes life into it, because everybody's worried about water security, everyone's worried about disaster risk reduction, everyone's concerned that we're spending our development project money actually on disaster recovery increasingly. And I think that's the space which brings the transversal conversation to the table. So we've been able to, in our sort of provincial strategic plan, be a transversal theme together with climate change, water resilience, and disaster risk reduction, as bringing the future proofing of our natural resources basically to the table. And I think that holds resonance. People have recent memories of impacts to nature from disasters, and I think that's what you need to work with.
That's a really interesting point, Marlene, and how to connect it with issues that really matter to people, right? And it will depend on local context. Madeleine?
Yeah, I think sort of, one of the ways we've gotten people to care and even to report their information is to, help them feel like they're a part of the solution. Because at the end of the day, people want to be hopeful and people want to help. And so that's how we've seen people react and to really sort of step up and help us with our reporting, with our storytelling, and sort of spreading the message. Is if they can feel like they're also a part of the solution, then they want to help. So I hope that we can feel like we're a part of the solution by reporting in on this as well.
Fantastic. Empowerment, right? Exactly. So making people not only part of the conversation, right, but making them feel empowered that they can actually contribute, that they can actually do something. That's quite powerful and very important to get people engaged, right? Not sure if there's any other reflections on that point, but yeah, that was a great question there. I think generated some interest. Maybe another general question: are there any specific targets or indicators that feel more relevant or realistic for your particular region to track, given the specific context? We've seen some great examples about how different indicator systems have been put into place. Quebec, great example, right, of indicator development. But I'm wondering if there are any specific GBF targets or specific kind of hot button indicators, right, that feel more relevant for your specific territorial contexts. Any of our panelists or anyone again on the call, happy to hear reflections.
I'm happy to speak a little bit more on that.
Please go ahead.
I think, one of the reasons 30 by 30 is the banner for us is because it's a very clear target with a very clear, this is how you report out on it, is just acres conserved. So there's some that are very easy, right, to report out and get people behind. But then some of the ones that have a little bit more of a qualitative reporting type, I think can get a little bit more lost. And they're still very important. Like, how do you report on the success of partnerships? Yes, you can do funding, and yes, you can do, number of partners and things like that, but that's not really getting to the core of how well you're working together. So I think finding good ways to report out on some of those more qualitative metrics is always a little bit more difficult, but still very important.
Absolutely. That's a great point, right? 30 by 30 is, of course, has received maybe the most attention because it's, quantitative, it's easy to track, it's easy to report on. I mean, it's not without its challenges, but, relatively straightforward. Whereas, most of the other GBF targets do have that more kind of qualitative character. So that is a significant challenge. I'm not sure if any other panelists have had any direct experience on kind of how to do that kind of more qualitative reporting, whether locally, any experience on that, or maybe face a similar challenge.
I think, yeah, it's interesting. I think there's always a balance to be had between quantitative and qualitative, which I guess is the previous thing about storytelling and empowering people. They're not things that are very easy to measure or find baselines for or triangulate. But I think it's important that we do both and rather than either or. I don't think that one has priority or is more acceptable than the other. I think one of the things that I'm really conscious of from a Scotland perspective is that in the marine environment, we have something called good environmental status, which has a huge array of indicators. And what's become interesting for us is one of those in particular is being used by environmental NGOs to take Scottish Government to court when we're not meeting it. So where we have to be very careful is just when we put an indicator in place, are we saying our reporting against it is going to be gold or it's going to be bronze? And whether that's quantitative or qualitative really helps in that process. And it also means then, to go to our South African colleagues' point, we're not investing resource and time in fighting court battles because it's much easier to talk about what we've done. And we can put our time and effort into meeting the indicators and targets that we've got. So I think the qualitative and quantitative aspect of 30 by 30 is really important. And I wouldn't want to dilute either of those mechanisms to talk about that.
It's really, really interesting case, right? Especially with the tool that's being used, right, to kind of keep governments honest, so to speak, but making sure, right, that the indicators then are workable and feasible, right? Because otherwise, then it can turn into even a legal challenge, right? So that's really interesting. So we've discussed, some maybe challenges here around kind of the qualitative reporting. Are there any other barriers that you either currently face or you anticipate that your particular region may face in measuring or reporting your progress in terms of biodiversity connected to the GBF? I don't know if there's any other barriers or challenges that maybe we could bring to the fore.
I'd like to reflect a little bit on the 30 by 30 as the kind of set piece, because I think it campaigns garner interest. It's a big, hairy, audacious plan makes people sit up. And I think, often when we speak about GBF targets, you can see people glaze over because they just really don't understand what we're talking about. But when we've got something very clear and yes, it's ambitious. I think it really does draw the attention of people and the imagination. So I do feel, though, in terms of our challenge, and we may have simple metrics for that, but my concern is also in the haste to meet 30 by 30, let's make sure we still have effective management, and let's make sure that we are securing in perpetuity. I think those are some of the pitfalls we need to be concerned about in terms of how we measure our success. And then, of course, working in the OECM space and how that works in relation to, does it provide effective protection, and what does that also mean for effective management? I think allied to 30 by 30 are the restoration targets for us, critical in our context in the Mediterranean climate. And I think also then to reflect on that there's a lot of sharing and learning to be had between networks of regions within the Mediterranean climate region. So you guys may know of MCAP, Mediterranean Climate Action Partnership. And I think there are very specific issues which we are drawn to in the indicator set, which are our challenges ultimately in terms of fire and the impacts of climate change, which affect us in a very particular way. So the restoration targets are also extremely important in our context, because that speaks to adaptation. It speaks to resource resilience ultimately for us, specifically in terms of water and disaster risk reduction.
Thanks, Marlene. That's fantastic. Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. The 30 by 30 target is, it's sometimes compared, right, to the 1.5 in the climate convention, right? A quantifiable goal that's very easy to understand, right, and kind of takes the lead. But it's really important as well, your point on the permanence, and we're also seeing that challenge in the climate sphere, right, where some commitments are now starting to be rolled back, right, and so in terms of biodiversity, protection, conservation, restoration, making sure that those efforts, when we are moving forward, are maintained moving forward, and we don't start to slip backwards over time. And really well received your point on MCAP as well. So the Mediterranean Climate Action Partnership, we know that Western Cape, also California here on the panel are involved in that initiative. And we're really quite, I think it's really interesting, that bioregional approach, right? Where, territories with common, in this case, Mediterranean climate, and ecosystems are experiencing similar challenges, and they can therefore share the different kinds of solutions, right, to these challenges. You mentioned some, water in particular, fire is another one, right? But I'm wondering if anyone else has had any experience with this kind of bioregional approach, right? Or kind of taking this perspective, or speaking with other regions that have similar biomes or ecosystems within their territories. We think MCAP is a really great leading example of this, and we're quite keen to learn more if there's any other initiatives or emerging interest, right, from other different kinds of bioregions. We know, for example, in Brazil, there's the Mata Atlântica, right? So the Atlantic Forest initiative, that there are several states within Brazil, right? It's a specific ecosystem there that have banded together. And I'm wondering if there's any reflections on the value of that kind of bioregional approach.
We do know, as you mentioned, the Atlantic Forest, Jordan. We have several examples, right, from our Brazilian friends and regions. So we know from Mari that they shared some examples of actions that they do throughout São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Minas Gerais, for example, or even the experience that they had in Paraná, right, recently with this event on the Atlantic Forest. So yeah, hopefully, yeah, we can share some examples afterwards, or we can include them if there's not enough time today. But yeah, looking forward to hear if you have any inputs afterwards as well.
Great. Well, yeah, please go ahead,
Yes,
Marie.
Jordan.
Yeah.
Yes, Jordan. I would to share our experience with interstate consortiums. So in Brazil, we have one interstate consortium called Southeast Consortium, and the main action of this consortium is a pact for protect the Atlantic rainforest. So 7 states share goals to increase protected areas, to monitor and to halt deforestation, and to work together to increase resilience of the cities through nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based adaptation. So it's a very interesting initiative. Last month, we have a big event we call a pre-COP of Atlantic rainforest in Brazil. And the governors, they shared the results of this pact. For example, we have the goal to reforest almost 90,000 sorry, 90,000 hectares of reforestation, and we have already matched half of this goal.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Marie, for that information. And yeah, we know well the Mata Atlântica initiative in Brazil, and we think it's a front runner, right, in that kind of interstate collaboration with lots of really interesting and innovative mechanisms taking place on the ground to help conserve that critical ecosystem. Okay, well, I think we've done well, and to now in these last few minutes, well, first I really thank all of our panelists again for your really thoughtful reflections, all of the different experiences, as well as your observations and comments on the challenges that you're facing. We really think that this adds a lot to the overall discussion around how regions are approaching biodiversity action. And of course, we welcome everyone on the call today that if you do have, as Gabby said, any follow-up questions or comments or cases that you'd like to highlight, to please do let us know. But now moving on to our closing remarks, we're very honored to have with us today Bianca Brazil, Program Manager at the UN Convention on Biological Diversity's Secretariat. So I welcome you, Bianca, to give us some final reflections on this growing importance of the subnational constituency in biodiversity governance and reporting from the perspective of the CBD Secretariat. So over to you. The floor is yours, Bianca.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Cool. So thank you for the opportunity to speak here on behalf of the CBD Secretariat. We've been collaborating in following the work of Regions4, Regions with Nature, ICLEI, and so many other great examples that we heard today. As we bring this discussion to a close, I think there's a few key messages that stand out to me. So the first one, today's exchanges have underscored that the road to Yerevan and COP17 is not simply about preparing another global meeting. It is about ensuring that the first global review of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework really captures the diversity of action that is taking place on the ground across all levels of government and across society. This is our opportunity to demonstrate accountability, to highlight success stories, and to recognize where course corrections are needed. I think also we have heard powerfully about the subnational imperative. So regional and local governments are not just implementing partners, they are innovators, they can accelerate action, they often are the first responders when it comes to biodiversity and oftentimes disasters, etc. So through platforms like Regions with Nature and Regions4, we now have structured pathways to ensure that this leadership is documented, is visible. It can be counted in a global review where we can evaluate what is happening on the ground. This is not a small achievement. It means that actions taken by cities, states, and provinces can directly shape the way the world measures progress and sets its future priorities. We need to evaluate what's working, what's not working, what's missing, and who better to let us know than the people on the ground, right? So I think lastly, reporting and monitoring are not only technical exercises, they are political acts, they are visibility, they involve recognition. When a subnational government aligns commitments with the Global Biodiversity Framework indicators and they share them internationally, they give them visibility, it doesn't only strengthen their own policy choices, but it also helps raise the collective ambition of the global community. You know, peer-to-peer evaluation oftentimes have a very strong balance, right?
As we move towards 2026, our task, I think, is clear enough. We need to support governments at all levels in preparing robust, timely national and subnational reports. We need to encourage greater use of collaborative platforms so that no effort remains invisible. And most importantly, we need to keep the voices of regions and local communities at the center of biodiversity action, where results are more tangible, more visible, and where we can actually connect with the people. I think to conclude, I just want to highlight that biodiversity implementation is only as strong as the partnerships that we forge and the commitments that we're willing to uphold together. So COP17 will mark a milestone, but the real measure of success will be whether the global review reflects the full spectrum of efforts from national strategies to local innovation, and whether it inspires greater collective action. So I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for your active engagement today, the organizers of this event for promoting this dialogue. I hope everyone disconnects here today from this session with renewed determination to make the subnational contribution to the Global Biodiversity Framework not just visible, but critical. Together, I think we can ensure that the time we arrive in Yerevan, the world can see how we are progressing, but also understand what needs to be done with more urgency. So I thank you again, and I am looking forward to our next engagements. I'm looking forward to seeing these great examples. The liaison that we've been doing with regions for Regions with Nature has been very, very meaningful for us. And this effort in bringing together what's been asked of parties, but giving you guys the opportunity to showcase what's being done, selecting good case stories that we can illustrate what's happening, to me will be very, very relevant. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Bianca, for those powerful reflections and remarks, and as well for your leadership and your collaboration. Networks like ICLEI and Regions 4, and all of the states and regions and provinces that we have with us today. We are doing our utmost, right, to make sure that these efforts continue to gather steam. But without this strong leadership and companionship from within the CBD, it's not possible really to bring these to bear in the international stage. So we really do thank you a lot for your collaboration and your dedication to these efforts, and we also look forward to continuing and strengthening this collaboration and these commitments moving forward. And finally, in the last minute, I'd like to hand the floor over to Gabriela Carrera of Regions 4 to give us some very brief wrap-up remarks and next steps. Go ahead, the floor is yours, Gabby.
Thank you. Thank you, Bianca. These messages are amazing and really summarize the whole essence of what we're doing today. So I won't go more into depth in that, just very technical details on next steps. So we'll send out an outcomes report to all attendees with the main recommendations and outcomes of this session. And the session will also be available in YouTube. So we'll share the link with you as well in the presentation, the PowerPoint, so you can access that information when you want to fill out both the action platform and the form for the case studies. So yeah, thank you so much. In representation of the Regions for Biodiversity Learning Platform, it's a pleasure to have you all here today, and let's continue to work together for the following months in the build-up to COP17. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm leaving my email here in case you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Have a wonderful morning, day, afternoon, evening.
Thank you.